So yes, my name is Brit Reichelt-Zolho. I'm Senior Program Officer for WWF Germany for Southern and Eastern Africa, with a focus on Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area. So far to the west from here and way away from South Africa in Southern Africa. And I'll start off with a little introduction. So Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area is roughly 1.5 the size of Germany, so 520,000 square kilometers big. And it's home to the largest savanna elephant population in Africa, and I believe then also in the world. In fact, they're just flying an aerial survey of the whole area of KAZA at this very moment, and it's going to take, I think, 3 months to count all the elephants and all the other wildlife, of course, in KAZA. And KAZA is actually enclosing a part of the territory of 5 countries: Angola, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And before I continue, I also want to, I'm still on the first slide. I also want to say that I am not here on my own. Of course, Christo is here as well, but there's also 2 other colleagues here, and maybe Agnes and Raymond, you can quickly raise your hand or stand up. So Raymond is, we ticked number 3 of Karen's last slide, our regional coordinator for monitoring and evaluation in our regional program on food security and habitat conservation in KAZA, which is funding a large part of what we're going to present soon. And Agnes is going to be the regional coordinator for the entire program. So I'm very happy that both are here. And Agnes, in fact, you can see her also on the screen, was engaged in the co-development, co-design of this method that we are going to present, and which is actually being implemented right at this moment in KAZA. So we are going to show you a little bit of details on the integrated livelihoods and monitoring system. It's one of the 3 pillars of the KAZA monitoring system. Now, the KAZA monitoring system sort of started to develop in an organic fashion by, let's say, 2015, 2017. And our aim is to build a system that can actually identify if all these initiatives in KAZA are having an impact on towards the vision of KAZA, which is sustainable development through tourism and nature conservation. So it consists of 3 pillars: biodiversity, land cover and land use change, as well as livelihoods. And together with Christo here, we developed this integrated method, or we call it blended method, in 2021, because there was a baseline in 2013-14, and we want to now compare data with that baseline. But when we ask a lot of people, so what do you want from this monitoring of livelihoods or socioeconomics, at the time we still called it, they said, well, you know, like many of you already said, communities are tired of so much research, there's research fatigue, we only focus on donors, communities have no interest. So we talked to the guru, I would say, in community-based research, Professor Christo, Fabricius, and started to develop this blended method. And on one hand, in the middle, you see what Christo is going to explain more later, is the system focusing on livelihood assets, you know, the natural, physical, social, financial, and human, which is administered through a household survey. And on the right, in the other figures and the star figure, you see the sort of more qualitative aspects of communities, governance, livelihood strategies, capabilities. And around it you can already see the sort of PRA methodologies that we are applying. So on one hand, and that's, I'm new to monitoring as well, I found this very interesting because somebody today said the traditional monitoring doesn't tell you the why something is happening, and this PRA method is definitely allowing us to investigate why some of these results are coming up from the household survey. And That's a very great power of the system. On the left, we thought we present KAZA to you, all these circles. Now you probably thought you're going to see lions and elephants, they are there as well. But what we want to show with this is, like all of our landscapes, there's so much knowledge there from in all levels, policy level, the ground level, there's so much data. And there's more than 60 cooperation partners active in KAZA. And what we are really wanting to do with most of these is to build a collaborative network of entities, a learning network of organizations in KAZA. Lifting all this data, the KAZA M&E system is already there. So the data is going into this system, which is an open access online system, and then making sense of all this data, analyzing it, putting it in relation with other variables, feeding it back into this learning network, and then hopefully into evidence-based decision making. We also want to work, so a lot of our time is actually spent on coordinating, collaborating, presenting this tool, working with other entities in the landscape, and that's very powerful. It's taking a lot of our time, but I think that's really where we're making progress and sharing the methodology. In fact, the methodology is being implemented by an organization already now that is not within our KAZA Impact Monitoring Working Group, by the BioHub. And we are sort of lagging behind our own methodology implementation. And that already shows the power of sharing methodologies and tools, because you then end up having standardized data, which you probably all know, and can compare even areas outside of KAZA with the KAZA communities. And maybe I haven't mentioned that earlier, we are actually implementing this in communities, in rural communities, and there's about 3 million people living in KAZA besides the 220,000 elephants. So you can imagine there's a lot of human-wildlife conflict. And that's obviously something that features very strongly in our M&E system. So yeah, and because communities are saying we are tired of all these drive-in, very expensive monitoring and surveys going on, we really want this methodology to be embedded in the communities. So at the moment, we are identifying community members that will be acting like facilitators, and eventually we are hoping also to include schools and find a very integrative way for the communities to now identify this data and upload it, synchronize it with the system that exists. Yeah, I think this is just to show you the access to the KAZA M&E site. It's actually on the landing page of the Kavango-Zambezi.org site. Anybody can find it and go there. This is how it all started on socioeconomic monitoring in KAZA. You see a little map there. That's the heart of KAZA, the Zambezi region, formerly known as the Caprivi Strip. And that's where the household survey was done in 2013 and 14. And it actually was done by an Austrian firm, and it left behind a large amount of knowledge and manuals that can be repeated. And it was done at the individual household level, which is also very powerful. And I hand over to Christo on this one.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Brit. That was great. I'm going to rush through this a little bit, but just to show that we had this roadmap that was, really starting with a conceptual framework and then moving through to this working on the user interface and experimenting and learning. And the idea was that we really needed to build capacity moving on from that ECHO survey in 2013 and empower communities and really work towards more community-based approaches, including that in that more technology-based monitoring. So this year we're looking at 20 to 30 communities in Namibia, Zambia, and Zim. We've got learning materials. You can see the website there. We're busy doing training courses. We're offering a summer school in November, and there's ongoing learning and reflection. And here's just some examples of the output. So this is from the more technical side, where the KAZA Livelihood Index has been calculated using these 5 assets. You can see that from 2013, the red dots there, to 2021, where it was repeated, you can already see that there's been actually a decline in many of the livelihood assets. So some inconvenient truths to these proponents of Transfrontier conservation coming out. We then, for the PRA methods, we're really using standardized data sheets. So it's not just pictures that are being used, but this is recorded very regularly and consistently and then stored in the KAZA Impact Monitoring database. Here's an example of, for example, monitoring the diversity of livelihood strategies. You use a participatory method, and then you can transfer it to a pie chart. And of course, over time, you can track how the diversity of livelihood strategies has changed, because that's nicely linked to resilience from our previous. Here's another example, trends in wildlife numbers. So you can actually use these bottle caps, and then you can convert those to graphs, and you can compare it to the formal surveys. And then, this cause-effect relationships, doing these problem trees to find out what are the root causes of some of these changes. And what we're already seeing from the community's work is that, for example, human-wildlife conflict is coming through very strongly, but people are telling us that it really is a symptom, and the causes are actually deforestation and human behavior and climate change. That's what they draw in these problem trees. So ultimately, really, the village committees need to be in charge of this monitoring. So we need to agree who, clearly identify how the reports will be stored, whether the village committees, schools, or churches are involved, and then we have to provide people with synthesized data and reports. So that's a common complaint. People are saying, "Well, you're coming in, doing this monitoring, but you're saying it's ours, but you're not even giving us feedback." So the feedback, we're really working on a series of methodologies and templates to do this properly to communities, and also let the communities themselves be involved in the feedback. So this shared conceptual framework provides a common ground. It's just simple enough to provide something for discussion, and then also that the whole process is very iterative. So you can see, we started off with these learning workshops, and then do a bit of field work, and then having these very regular group calls. So this network of people really engaged in this, constantly learning and reflecting, and sometimes we even have weekly calls to discuss the ups and downs of our experiences, and then going into regular analysis and reflection when we move into almost out of this cycle. So yeah, 7 principles. Co-design, I think we've heard this so much today, and it keeps repeating itself. The other one is enthusiastic adoption by grassroots organizations. We can't just go in there as academics and NGOs and impose these things on people. Awareness and support with the local district authorities. So we forget that there's these authorities and government officials. You need endorsement by, and here we're very lucky, Brit, that KAZA Secretariat has actually adopted this methodology, so they really have embraced this. And then there's ongoing capacity development, constant learning, and then also community capacity. You need these functioning institutions, you need effective governance, and you need sustainable income streams. If people don't see the money, I think they really are going to get very despondent about participating in this monitoring. So these are, Brit, maybe you can read that. She's baffled, but you wrote that,
Oh my God, okay.
Sorry, I caught you off guard.
No problem. I think I mentioned that earlier, that we want to implement a standardized system, so we can compare data also between communities, within countries, but then eventually maybe also across countries, and then it should be accessible to everybody. We actually have, between the University of Bonn, as Mandela University, ProSuli, and others who are our partners, principles of cooperation, like a memorandum of understanding that we share data freely amongst ourselves. Yes, the next steps. We finally managed to get finance from a donor for this monitoring and evaluation, which allowed us to hire a coordinator for regional coordination of M&E and L. And we will hopefully be able to interpret the results and then have workshops or policy briefs and so on the outcomes. Yes, and as you correctly said, KAZA Secretariat, I forgot to mention, I mentioned the KAZA Impact Monitoring Working Group. We actually have representatives from all 5 countries on it, the KAZA Secretariat, Peace Parks Foundation, WWF, Nelson Mandela University, and few more. And already with these people, you can see that they are major players in the KAZA landscape, and they're embracing this methodology, and we've co-developed it with them, and that's the great power behind it. I think it already is a great step towards deploying it widely in the landscape.
And I also want to just acknowledge other players. Chloe is very much involved in the ProSuli project. They really started helping and adopting these technologies. And Eve is one of the brains behind BioHub and the whole RPPCP in Zimbabwe. And it's a really nice collaboration that's coming through there by this ripple effect. Matt Sailstra, your ripples. Thank you.